Patti LuPone is a great example of why you need to stop being so mean to people, especially if you're trying to have a long-lasting career.
It's okay to have a bold, audacious, confrontational diva personality where you're willing to speak your mind. It is not okay to use that personality as a justification for microaggressions, racism, bullying, and just being mean-spirited and mean.
Patti LuPone is what happens when an insecure little girl gets everything that she wants.
Shut up, Patti LuPone! Shut your brassy, magnificent trap!
Hello everyone, my name is Kayla Saz and welcome to Jackass. Today we are doing another episode of the series How the Internet Fell Out of Love, and we are talking about the Broadway diva herself, Patti LuPone. I also have a special guest with me to provide some additional theater-related context for today's video, your favorite breaking Broadway tea influencer from TikTok, the Sweaty Oracle. If you're into Broadway news, be sure to give him a follow on TikTok if you haven't already.
Don't cry for me, Argentina. The truth is I never left you.
To put it simply, Patti LuPone is a theater icon. She has multiple Tony, Grammy, and Olivier awards, and has played a ton of iconic roles on Broadway, including Eva Perón in Evita and Mama Rose in Gypsy. Some of you may also know her from her role in Agatha All Along on Disney+.
They fell out of love with her at the height of her power on the internet because Patti's been popping off online since like the internet started, but nobody has really noticed until Agatha All Along. And she became like a pop culture icon somehow through that, like a TikTok icon, these posts with millions of views. And to watch her like get to the pinnacle and then get to the fall at like the exact, it's like Shakespearean almost.
Patti has always been a rather outspoken woman about a lot of different things. Many know the infamous story about her famous feud with Andrew Lloyd Webber, where he chose Glenn Close to replace her as Norma Desmond in the Broadway debut of Sunset Boulevard in the 90s after she had been performing the role on the West End. She later sued Webber for a breach of contract and used that money to construct what she calls the Andrew Lloyd Webber Memorial Swimming Pool. Patti has also infamously reprimanded audience members on 2 occasions, stopping a performance during the 2008 revival of Gypsy because of flash photography.
Stop taking pictures right now! You heard the announcement? Who do you think you are?
And physically taking an audience member's cell phone during a performance of Shows for Days off-Broadway.
And she was sitting right there in the second seat. It was, everybody can see, look how teeny this theater is. And she was oblivious to everybody except for herself and her phone.
The legendary star reenacting the real-life drama on stage last night.
It was right here, it was this lady right here, and I just grabbed the phone and went,
LuPone snatching a phone from an audience member mid-performance on Wednesday.
Patti LuPone is both the unstoppable force and the unmovable wall. Patti LuPone is a train whistle that has lost its diction. Patti LuPone is Frank Oz always described Miss Piggy as like a self-confident truck driver pretending to be a Broadway star. And like, that's kind of the attitude. And I mean that like as a compliment to Patti, because everybody else on Broadway is kind of playing these political games and is obviously very fake when they are in the press or in the public eye. Patti is like a truck driver that you meet at a Buc-ee's in the Midwest. She's gonna shoot right from the hip, and she's not really gonna care where that bullet lands. And that's what gave her diva status on Broadway, along with obviously having a wild and interesting voice and playing roles like Eva Perón.
This kind of stuff tends to work really well for Patti when she is juxtaposed against someone who is generally unlikable. For example, a lot of people really dislike Andrew Lloyd Webber, so they enjoy the pool story. A lot of people hate when audience members use their phones, so viral clips of Patti being mean to people using their phones in the theater is rather cathartic. And speaking of her going up against unlikable people, let's chat a little bit about Patti's politics.
Why should President Trump come see your show?
Well, I hope he doesn't, because I won't perform if he does.
Really?
Really.
Tell me why.
Because I hate the motherfucker. How's that?
So from like 2016 to 2019, peak Hamilton influence time, the theater sort of became the primary hashtag resistance stomping ground for using art to stand up to Trump, and Patti often spoke out against him. Commendable at the time, for sure, especially because Donald Trump is a Broadway fan, and a big fan of Andrew Lloyd Webber at that.
I look at this beautiful letter I get from Andrew Lloyd Webber, who was big before Phantom, but nothing like Phantom. And he did Jesus Christ Superstar, which was another great one. He did a lot of great things. But he said, because he lived in the building at Trump Tower, he knew me a little bit. And he said, I'd love to have you as my guest. I'm opening up a musical called The Phantom of the Opera. And I said, oh, so let's go. So I say on the letter, okay, I'll go. And anyway, we went. And it opens with the chandelier and this. You've been there, right?
Yes,
You've seen
yes,
it.
yes.
Do you agree? It's like
first time I saw it shocked you when the chandelier drops.
No, but the whole thing was great.
Magnificent.
It was a great, great musical.
Patti also made headlines in 2020 for calling out an audience member for not wearing a mask during a conversation with the cast of Company, a show she was starring in around that time.
You don't want to follow the rule, get the
Patti's reactions to things always seem to be a decent reflection of the times that we're living in, because rarely are celebrities as outspoken or passionate or angry as her in certain situations. She kind of probably reflects how a lot of celebrities feel about certain things, but they won't ever say it. And it makes people naturally want to wave away her diva-esque behavior, because at least she's doing something that a lot of people in Hollywood don't do, standing up for what she believes in. But what happens when she's standing on the wrong side of an issue? For example, back in 2022, Patti claimed to have given up her actor's equity card, meaning that she was leaving the Broadway union. In a social media post, she wrote, "Quite a week on Broadway, seeing my name being bandied about," which is a reference to a situation that happened at Hadestown around the time in which a performer confronted an audience member, and people were comparing that incident to Patti LuPone's past behavior in confronting audience members. "Gave up my equity card, no longer part of that circus, figure it out." She later gave a statement saying, "When the run of Company ended this past July, I knew I wouldn't be on stage for a very long time. And at that point, I made the decision to resign from Equity." She has also separately said that they are a bad organization that doesn't treat actors well and that she doesn't want to give them any money anymore. For those not familiar with the policy of Equity membership, it is generally considered a prerequisite for being able to appear in an official capacity on Broadway, but despite this announcement, she was still able to star alongside Mia Farrow in a play called The Roommate on Broadway in 2024. The sourcing for this is complicated, but people speculate that it's because at some point she got her equity card back, or she never actually gave it up in the first place, she just said she did, or she's using some kind of loophole. Either way, many consider the move to be attention-seeking and harmful to the solidarity of those in the actors union, especially because, again, she has come back to Broadway in an official capacity since this all happened, and because people tend to rag on her for getting special treatment because she is Patti LuPone.
Patti, a few years ago, gave a big deal about giving up her equity card. I'm not going to do Broadway anymore. This is the Broadway I grew up with. They let people walk through Times Square now. We can't hit them with cars, or whatever she's complaining about. That's a privilege you have as a white woman, to be able to do that and then immediately come back. Not even 6 months later, be like, haha, with no explanation, with no apology for kind of, disparaging. I've said disparaging too many times, for coming at the community.
That catches us up to Patti's most recent controversy, also in 2024. When she was starring in the play The Roommate, she was sharing a wall with the Shubert Theater, which was hosting the musical Hell's Kitchen at the time. In a now deleted video, somebody was asking Patti to sign a Hell's Kitchen playbill, which she declined, claiming that it was because the show was too loud.
"I'm not signing a Hell's Kitchen, they're too loud."
After that video circulated, Tony Award winner Kecia Lewis, who was starring in Hell's Kitchen at the time, elaborated on these comments in a video on social media, claiming that Patti complained to the owner of the Shubert Theater about Hell's Kitchen's volume and how it was interfering with her performance in The Roommate. Kecia also asked for an apology from Patti because, in her opinion, the comment about Hell's Kitchen as a production was microaggressive due to the fact that it had a cast of color.
Ms. LuPone, I understand that there have been a couple of situations that have gone on in the last few weeks that I want to address. The first one is that you contacted our theater owner about changing a couple of our sound cues because you found them to be too loud. You also after our sound design was adjusted, sent flowers to our sound and stage management team, thanking them. I wanted to address this because, Ms. LuPone, these actions, in my opinion, are bullying. They're offensive. They're racially microaggressive. They're rude. They're rooted in privilege. And these actions also lack a sense of community and leadership for someone as yourself who has been in the business as long as you have.
One of the people who showed support for Kecia Lewis's post was Audra McDonald, a Broadway legend who is currently playing Mama Rose in the Gypsy revival on Broadway right now. She posted a series of emojis seemingly standing in solidarity against Patti's comments. Patti acknowledged that Audra did this in a recent profile in The New Yorker, in which she said that Audra should, quote, know better, and that's typical of Audra, she's not a friend. According to the writer of this profile, LuPone and Audra have some long-ago rift, although Patti did not want to say what it was about. When asked about Audra's current Tony-nominated production of Gypsy, Patti looked out the window before saying, "What a beautiful day." In this profile, Patti also had some strong words for Kecia Lewis herself, calling her a bitch. She also questioned Lewis's reference to both herself and LuPone as Broadway veterans, saying, quote, "Here's the problem, she calls herself a veteran? Let's find out how many Broadway shows Kecia Lewis has done, because she doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about." Patti adds that a vet would know that this is not unusual on Broadway, this happens all the time when walls are shared. Now, I'm probably going to say this multiple times in this video. I didn't think anything was going to come of this because Patti is Patti. She's a diva, she says what she thinks, and everyone just kind of lets it slide because she's Patti, right? But in the last few weeks, we've learned that if you come for Audra McDonald, you better not miss. Shortly after this interview, over 500 members of the theater community called out Patti LuPone's, quote, bullying of Audra McDonald and Kecia Lewis. Hundreds of performers on Broadway and other theater communities wrote a letter in which they characterized Patti's comments as, quote, degrading and misogynistic, and a blatant act of racialized disrespect. It constitutes bullying, it constitutes harassment. It is emblematic of the microaggressions and abuse that people in this industry have endured for far too long, too often without consequence. Audra also sort of responded to the controversy in an interview with Gayle King, and Gayle King, in Gayle King fashion, sort of just sprung this on her with no context, kind of.
Surprised to hear that said about you from her. And I'm not trying to start a Broadway dust-up here, but I'm wondering how you're processing.
I mean, I don't... If there's a rift between us, it's I don't know what it is. That's something that you'd have to ask Patti about. Mm-hmm. You know, I haven't seen her in about 11 years just because I've been busy just with life and stuff. So I don't know what rift she's talking about, but you'd have to ask her.
Side note, I happened to see Audra in Gypsy like the night before I'm recording this because I won the Broadway lottery. I never win the Broadway lottery, so this is just like a divine intervention, I suppose. But she was amazing. I haven't seen Nicole in Sunset, so I guess I can't give an honest comparison, but like, I would have given Audra that Tony, I'm just saying. Audra McDonald is the greatest of all time.
Yeah, that was, I did not deserve to be in that theater.
Greatest of all time. All time.
Yeah.
At the end of it, she brought up this feud that she has with Kecia Lewis. And Kecia Lewis is the star of Hell's Kitchen, won a Tony Award, been around as long as Patti LuPone, in the original cast of fucking Dreamgirls, legend. Patti, 6 months or whatever later goes into this, calls Kecia a bitch, and then starts randomly shooting off at Audra McDonald for reasons we still don't really know, because Patti and Audra, Patti's memoirs behind me somewhere on that shelf, she talks about thanking Audra McDonald as the end-all be-all of being a Broadway star. They've done concerts together. They did Sunday in the Park with George together at the Ravinia Festival. They have been friends, and for Patti to go in and burn a bridge seemingly for no reason, and there's speculation because she talks about Audra very vaguely in that expose. One of the funniest things I've heard, somebody I know thinks it's because when Patti was doing Company on Broadway, they did the big Stephen Sondheim online tribute, and Meryl Streep and Christine Baranski were asked to sing Ladies Who Lunch with Audra McDonald, not Patti, who was playing that role. And you would think that'd be petty. I don't know if that's true at all, but you would be surprised how high school some of Broadway is. Some people think it's because Audra sided with Kecia Lewis, but whatever the reason is, Patti took two direct shots at Broadway people in this interview. They were both Black women. Audra seems to have eclipsed Patti. Patti's never going to win 7 fucking Tony Awards. There aren't 7 roles left in her. Audra's having this big moment with Mama Rose, which was really Patti's last huge moment on Broadway. And Patti seeming to choose those two targets in that expose. I don't think, and I've made mistakes this way, you don't have to have racist intentions to do something racist and to commit an act that comes off as racism and that causes racial harm. I don't think Patti set off that day to say, I'm going to disparage the Black women who make up the backbone of Broadway. I think Patti did not think about that aspect of who she was disparaging. When Broadway has systematically oppressed people, and particularly when Kecia has just had her moment winning a Tony Award and Audra is having her moment, but being the first Black woman on Broadway to play the role of Broadway, the role that was Patti LuPone's before this. We had all decided Patti gets Mama Rose, and arguably Audra outacted her. I think it made somebody a little bit bitter.
But yeah, the heat was on Patti LuPone in a way that I personally have never seen before. There were people actively demanding, collectively, for her to take accountability. Even people who had been fans of her or defended her on social media in the past. And then Patti did something that I never thought she would ever do in a million years. She apologized. The statement reads, "For as long as I have worked in the theater, I have spoken my mind and never apologized. That is changing today. I am deeply sorry for the words I used during the New Yorker interview, particularly about Kecia Lewis, which were demeaning and disrespectful. I regret my flippant and emotional responses during this interview, which were inappropriate, and I am devastated that my behavior has offended others and has run counter to what we hold dear in this community. I hope to have the chance to speak with Audra and Kecia personally to offer my sincere apologies. I wholeheartedly agree with everything that was written in the open letter shared yesterday. From middle school drama clubs to professional stages, theater has always been about lifting each other up and welcoming those who feel they don't belong anywhere else. I made a mistake, I take full responsibility for it, and I am committed to making this right. Our entire theater community deserves better. Patti LuPone."
And there's a line in it that kind of bugs me. If you're a almost 80-year-old woman and you write an apology with, "I've never had to apologize before," maybe you have. I don't doubt that this is the first time she has apologized, but to me, that was a red flag nobody picked up on. I've apologized like 9 times this week, twice today to people. Maybe I'm a worse person than she is. I don't know. But like being 80 years old and flaunting, "I've never apologized," isn't the flex you think it is in a apology, whether it was written by you or a really good crisis management team, which I'm not accusing.
Patti did not attend the 2025 Tony Awards, which happened this past weekend. Audra McDonald did not win a Tony Award for her portrayal of Mama Rose in Gypsy either. She lost to Nicole Scherzinger, who was in a controversy after liking a social media post in support of President Donald Trump in the fall of last year. I bring this up because I think the theater community is unique in the sense that both members and spectators of Broadway as an institution are constantly looking inward, constantly asking one another to do better, whether it's performative or not. And you could argue that Patti's apology is entirely performative. And unless your name is Audra McDonald or Kecia Lewis, it is not your apology to accept.
I get it. I get that's the extent of a lot of those people's care, that it's, she's difficult, she can sing. Catch Lea Michele in Chess on Broadway this fall.
Literally.
Or go see Nicole in Sunset until July. I say that there are a lot of non-difficult people who are lovely in the industry, who can hit the same notes, and who can probably find more acting beats that you should be putting your time, effort, and money behind, rather than these old, petty, bitter people.
This is one of those how the internet fell out of love stories that was perplexing every step of the way. It's one where at no point did I know what was going to happen next, mainly because Powerful people with platforms were demanding accountability to another powerful person who caused harm. And nowadays, I'm not really used to that anymore. One, because we have a government full of criminals, and two, a lot of that sort of inter-community litigation often gets boiled down to like performative 2020 woke shit that's not worth doing anymore because the fascists are in charge or whatever. But I look at this whole situation, one where Audra is getting uplifted across the internet after decades of sharing her incredible talent with the world, and one where Patti LuPone, an old school Broadway diva who doesn't give a fuck about anyone or anything, actually apologized. And if that can happen due to the sheer collective action of enough people willing to call out right from wrong, then really, anything is possible.
Do you remember your first theater production that you attended?
Well, a long time ago. I would say maybe it was Cats.
Cats. First Lady, do you remember your first theater production you saw?
Phantom of the Opera. Are you a Les Mis fan, Mrs. Strunk? I am.
Are we going to munch on some popcorn and Diet Coke tonight while we watch the production?
I think so. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.